Welcome back, everyone. My name is Brutal. I hope you enjoyed the most recent video regarding the top 15 dungeons of WoW over the past decade. It was actually a lot of fun to make. I really appreciate everyone's views and the comments and sharing the video and whatnot, so feel free to do the exact same for this video. But today's video is something even grander, something even larger in scale. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about bumping up from dungeons to raids. And today I bring to you, the top 8 raids of the past decade. But I'm gonna start not with Icecrown Citadel. I know Icecrown Citadel was the raid going into 2010, but I'm trying to start from Cataclysm, which did launch, granted, toward the end of 2010, December 2010. Listen, Ruby Sanctum, no one cares, man. No one cares about Ruby Sanctum. If anyone's favorite raid out there was Ruby Sanctum, you've got problems, okay? But nevertheless, we're gonna start with the Cataclysm raids, because everyone loved ICC. And if you didn't like ICC, you have a different problem, so there's that. Now, I think back on Cataclysm, which, as I mentioned in the top 15 dungeon video, Cataclysm is often referred to as a lackluster expansion. I don't necessarily agree, especially not in all areas. I think that most of Cataclysm's raids were actually quite good. Even Dragon Soul to a degree, outside of Madness and Spine, which, by the way, when I eventually get around to doing my worst raid bosses of all time video, you'll already know. You're already going to know what the Madness and or Spine will be the top 1 or 2 there. It's guaranteed. So you don't even have to watch that video. Nevertheless, I tangented a bit there. I apologize. When it comes to Cataclysm's raids, everyone loves Firelands, and everyone, loves, Heroic Ragnaros, and this is not a top raid boss video. That's another video coming up soon. When I think about my favorite raids over the past decades, I'm trying to consider a bunch of different aspects or areas of what makes a raid fun. The bosses, of course, the end boss, but the aesthetics, the atmosphere, the environment, the approach, how many bosses were in there. I mean, so many things go into what makes a raid fun for me. Now, granted, this is a very subjective list. I feel like I've talked enough. But then again, this whole video is of me talking, so buckle up. You're in for a fun ride. Bastion of Twilight and Blackwing Descent. To me, the first tier of Cataclysm, what was it, tier 10, I believe it was? The first tier of Cataclysm, outside of Throne of the Four Winds, which wasn't bad, but not really my favorite. But Bastion of Twilight and Blackwing Descent, to me, is the best example of an entry raid to any expansion, any raid that we've ever had before. I think back, and I reminisce about those 2 raids, and I think they absolutely crushed it. My goodness, man. In no particular... Well, I'll start with Bastion of Descent, listen to me. Blackwing Descent. I think back on Blackwing Descent, and I remember the first 2 bosses, the Omnitron Defense System and Magma, I believe, were the names of the bosses. Very straightforward, very easy to understand, easy to approach, outside of having to kite that one ad around, down the stairs, back up the stairs in Magma. I think they hotfixed that after we killed it. I don't really remember. But just being able to zone in and interacting with Nefarian again, and, at the end, the actual Nefarian fight, the Onyxia fight, seeing them just resurrected and brought back from the dead, undead version of Onyxia. And listen, I'm a big Chris Metzen fan. I loved having him back to voice act. I think he's the voice actor in Nefarian. Am I crazy? I'm pretty sure. I hope I'm not wrong about that. And Atramedes, what a cool looking dragon, but Blackwing Descent was a great compliment to Bastion of Twilight. And I think one of the reasons why these 2 raids stand out to me so much bright, they shine so much brighter than other raids, is because Static, my guild at the time, man, we were We did such a great job that tier. I had so much fun. Halfus, the first boss in Bastion of Twilight, that was so cool. And I love the interaction with these encounters. Halfus with the different dragons. You had the Elemental Monstrosity, the third boss in Bastion. That boss was a nightmare. Holy cow, that boss was hard in its heyday. That sucker was just not impossible to kill, but for lack of a better phrase, he was just ridiculously tough. Impossible for a while. That fight was unforgiving. And again, this is not a favorite fight of all time video, but Cho'Gall in Bastion of Twilight is one of my favorite fights of all time. I was tanking that fight. I remember just this behemoth of an NPC in the form of Cho'Gall just flailed wildly. You had the ads and the color scheme. God, man, I could go on about Bastion and Blackwing Descent for the entirety of this video, but I do need and want to move on. Sinestro wasn't bad. Sinestro was probably one of my least favorite, secret fights, least favorite in-game fights, but I don't count that against the entirety of the tier or the raid. She wasn't bad. I just don't think that it was that spectacular. But comparatively, yes, I know Firelance was great and all, but to me, Heroic Ragnaros was just an amazing boss in a rather mediocre raid. So to me, for Cataclysm, I'm giving it to Bastion of Twilight and Blackwing Descent without a shadow of a doubt. Great example of entry raids. Moving on to Mr. Pandaria, I think we can all agree, if we skip past the first tier, not that those raids were bad, but very few raids, specifically in the past decade, very few raids, all-encompassing, just including everything from start to finish, compare or hold a candle to Throne of Thunder. Come on, people. Talk about an experience. You get in there, you murder some trolls, you murder some Mogu, what's not to love? But I remember, again, Static, my guild at the time, there was something special about that raid. We really just clicked. And we were so cohesive and cooperative, and we worked so hard to perform so well in that raid. And the first boss, again, this brute of a troll, this giant troll. I remember getting thrown by him and just blitzing through him. And then you move from a giant troll to a giant, I almost said Tyrannosaurus, to a giant Triceratops who drops a cool mount. And as I stated at the beginning, very subjective list. I can remember, and we all do this, I remember aspects of progression and aspects of farm in these raids, and to me, that makes an experience to be remembered. That adds to the experience of what makes a raid your favorite or your not so favorite raid or experience, right? But I remember we were working on Horadin, the second boss of the raid, and we were so close to a kill, and my good buddy Lane, who was a Shadow Priest at the time, takes out that sacrificial dagger that existed way back in the 2011, 2012 era, and he murders himself. He commits suicide. He kills himself in the game, and he falls over, and because of that, we wiped. I don't remember the details of it, but I remember specifically that if he had not done that, we would have killed the boss that pull. We were absolutely just, we didn't understand. Oh, God, man, that was a running joke forever. But you move throughout the raid and you encounter Lei Shen, the final boss. You encounter Lei Shen a few times throughout the raid. You kill a giant bird. You murder a giant eyeball. You kill a giant anima that's enclosed in a robot suit. Probably one of my least favorite fights ever. That fight is what made me start saying feet whenever I raid lead, because instead of saying, hey guys, watch for this ability, that stupid boss, I know this is my favorite raid of all time, or a video of my favorite raids of all time, but that stupid boss got me in the habit of just saying feet, so that's what I say to this day. And, you get to Lei Shen, and just like Heroic Ragnaros and Firelands, Heroic Lei Shen in Throne of Thunder was a monster of a fight. And yes, I know Ra-Den, the boss after him, was technically the final boss. He was on a limited attempt approach. You can only do, I think it was, 30 pulls per week, maybe 50. I think it was 30 pulls per week. But that raid, just, again, I apologize for not having a deeper vocabulary, but the aesthetic, the feel, the aura of the raid, just jumping in there and working your way, into the castle or into the compound, the Taj Mahal, whatever you want to call it, and then getting thrown down at that bridge and having to climb your way back up through the sewers and going in the back way where the anima and the eyeball exists. God, man, that raid, start to finish, one of the greatest examples of a raid of all time. Of course, the other raid that I'm going to give a gold star to in, what's this raid? Oh, Mist of Pandaria, believe it or not, is Siege of Orgrimmar. Now, I know people, you're probably thinking to yourself, Siege of, what are you talking about, Brutal? 14. Listen, I don't count the time that we were in Siege of Orgrimmar against Siege of Orgrimmar. That is not Siege of Orgrimmar's fault, ladies and gentlemen. Siege of Orgrimmar was a fantastic raid for the most part, in almost all areas. That raid was so cool and so much fun, and it is a crime and it is a shame that its legacy is tainted by 14 months of farm content. That is not Siege of Orgrimmar's fault. How dare you? But Siege of Orgrimmar, again, you're assaulting the gates of Orgrimmar. You are going into Orgrimmar, and you are laying waste to Garrosh Hellscream's forces. You get to murder shamans, folks. There is a shaman boss, or two of them, I guess I should say, and you get to murder them halfway through the raid. What is not to love? But in all seriousness, I love the variety of bosses in all of these raids I've talked about. Throne of Thunder, Siege of Orgrimmar. I love the variety of bosses. I love the fact that around this time, I don't remember the first raid, but around this time they started to incorporate some really nice cinematics or like cut scenes or various ways to approach the story-driven aspects of the raid. I love the just how it flows through the raid when you get to certain areas. Galacross, not my favorite experience, but nevertheless. Was that the boss's name? Galacross, I think. You'd think I would know this, but nah. Who cares? Who cares? Iron Juggernaut, what a cool fight, man. What a cool, just this giant scorpion machine thing. Come on. Beams of death. Get good, people. Get good. God, man. But I reminisce and I reflect on these, but nothing in Siege of Orgrimmar compares to the fact that the end boss, Garrosh Hellscream himself, I was playing a Brewmaster Monk at the time, and if you recall, back in the day, Brewmaster Monks used to be able to throw their kegs of beer, and they would be able to, it would splash, and it would generate aggro, and it would slow NPCs that it touched, that the brew would touch. And monks were, very typically, you would find monks kiting, not only in Siege of Orgrimmar, but in many areas of the game, raids, whatever. And I prided myself on being able to kite like a boss. And another fun fact, Throne of Thunder, I didn't stream. I didn't start streaming until Siege of Orgrimmar. But in Throne of Thunder, the guy I mentioned who killed himself on Horden, he was streaming at the time. And he did this really cool thing to where he would Skype call me and other people in the guild, and we would all have a webcam present on Lane stream. And I have viewers who watch my stream today, still to this day, that know me from Lane stream before they knew me from my own stream. Because Lane didn't stream much, if any, of Siege of Orgrimmar. And I decided to start my YouTube channel and my Twitch channel during Siege of Orgrimmar. So Siege of Orgrimmar has a very, very soft spot in my heart for many different reasons, but that's definitely one of them. Because as I would kite those ads on Garrosh, as I would, get ready and prepare for my role in the fight, there would be times I would pick up my guitar and I would just strum along, or not along, but I would strum out a song and I would sing about what we're doing, and people would tune into my stream and they got a kick out of that. Or they disliked it and left, but nevertheless. But I remember literally playing my guitar and singing during Garrosh Hellscream progression, because there was not very much of a DPS check at various points in the fight. We would need to hold DPS to push at proper time. So as a tank, let alone a tank whose entire job and role in the fight was to kite, I would just kill time by playing guitar, and it was fun to do in the stream. And God, man, just kiting those iron stars in the last phase of Garrosh. What a fun raid. And again, it makes me so sad that it lasted as long as it did, because people just, it left a sour taste in their mouth. Moving from Mists to Warlords of Draenor, WoD. WoD is an interesting expansion, right? We all have an opinion about Warlords of Draenor. Like it, love it, Garrison sucked. I love my Garrison. Whatever, man. We all have an opinion about everything. But something I think a lot of people agree on are the raids in Warlords of Draenor were pretty dang good. Maybe not the best raids of all time, but we didn't suffer through bad encounters or bad design. Many of the encounters were top-notch, and many of the fights were fun and memorable. And I wish I could sit here and say that I loved every aspect of it, but I had to pick and choose. I chose 2 out of the 3 that existed. And I decided to leave High Maul by the wayside, even though Mythic Imperator Margok is one of my favorite fights of all time. And you'll notice that, like Heroic Ragnaros, Mythic Imperator Margok, I love those fights, but I don't include them into my top raids of all time because I'm trying to include as many aspects of the raid as possible. But I look at Blackrock Foundry, and it's a great example of a raid that is inclusive, that gives you a chance to explore, to delve deep, to climb to new heights, whatever, man. Blackrock Foundry was so much fun. Outside of stinking Furnace, stupid Furnace, hate that fight. There's always that one fight. There's always that one. But, different wings. I'm a big fan of wings in raids. There's nothing wrong with a linear approach, but wings just make things more fun in my eyes. In Blackrock Foundry, God, Darren DePaul, the voice of Blackhand himself. Come on. How do you... And he does the voice of Reinhardt and Socrathar in Hellfire Citadel and N'Zoth. Hello, he does the voice of N'Zoth right now in Battle for Azeroth. The guy is a rock star. He is an all-star. He does the voice of Blackhand, which just added to the experience. But Blackrock Foundry was phenomenal. God, again, just so many fun different fights and so many callbacks. Gruul, you got to fight Gruul. He dropped another Dragonspine trophy. Hopefully you got this one more easily and more often than the original back in TBC. Gotta love your Gruul encounter. Hans and Franz, they're not a callback per se, but get under the stamper. Get down. Listen, I don't remember what the lines are in the fight, but you have, these voice actors that are obviously imitating Arnold, and get in there. God, man. I remember I was streaming Blackrock Foundry, and Keith Jr., those of you who have been watching the channel for any amount of time, you know who Keith Jr. is. He's a very, very popular and famous viewer on the channel. He said, Brutal, if you raid lead... I think it was just for, if you raid lead for through the next boss. I think we moved from Hans and Franz. God, I don't remember. But I think we were on Operator Thogar. Eventually we got to Operator Thogar, the train dude, which, come on, baby. I'll get to that in a second. And he eventually donated $500 because of my terrible, terrible impression of Arnold. Get down. Listen, the trains are coming. Don't stand there. But it just, he had such a blast with that, and it tickled him to death, and he donated. And it's just aspects like that just add to why I love these raids, man. There's so much fun to think about or to remember and to enjoy in the moment. But Operator Thogar, talk about a unique experience. I remember memorizing the trains as they would come in, which lane was safe, which lane was not safe, where we needed to stand, did we need to move up, did we need to move to the side. That fight on Mythic was absolutely unforgiving. I loved the design of that fight, and I'm sure some people hated it, but man, I loved it. Golly, and Blackhand himself, I remember this was Blackrock Foundry was the last raid, it was the last tier and the last raid that Static ever did. It ever did. Because my guild right now is not Static, it's Dagnabbit. I started a new guild, new beginning, new everything, new approach. And I remember killing Blackhand. I remember recruiting some Moonkins and just having them flap down during the fight and just murder the the walkways, the rafters, or whatever the balconies, whatever you want to call them, just murdering the ads up there as multi-daughters. I just had a blast in that raid, man, for so many different reasons. And I know as I sit here, I'm not reading off of a script. I'm just spitting out whatever comes to mind. I know I'm forgetting people and things and events, and I apologize if I'm forgetting something you guys either know about or witnessed on the stream over the last, 10 years. Not that I've been streaming for that long, but over the last 6 years that I've been streaming. The other raid in Blackrock Foundry, in Warlords of Draenor is Hellfire Citadel. HFC, again, I do not count the time that we were in HFC against HFC. But HFC, we get in there, we're fighting back the Legion. It's the first stepping stone toward the Legion expansion. I mean, heck, Gul'dan, hello, Gul'dan, even though we don't fight him per se, or at all, I don't know why I said per se. He's there, he's front, maybe not front and center, but he's there, he's involved. God, I played a Hunter and a Moonkin during this tier because I had retired Static to start a family. And I just remember that, dude, when I played that Hunter, I genuinely don't think I've ever played a class as well as I played my Hunter during that tier. I think that is the best I've ever performed or played in any tier, in any raid. I don't know why, it just clicked, man. That marksmanship kill shot, woo! God, I miss kill shot. Can't wait for it to come back in Shadowlands. But nevertheless, HFC, first boss aside, don't worry about that first boss. Get that trash out of here. I loved it, man. Again, I guess they weren't, there were wings, various wings, both on the bottom and the top floor. You gotta see Gorefiend completely engorged on souls. Just so much fun, man. An absolute blast of a raid. Socrathar, again, Darren DePaul. You got to fight a big bird, Iskar, who, if you swap two letters around, it's instead of Iskar, it's Ixar, which is a race in EverQuest. Can't go wrong with EverQuest. Which has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but nevertheless, HFC was a beautiful raid. I mean, again, just the aesthetics, the design of it was gorgeous. Fun fights, a variety of fights. Just so many different types of encounters out there. And, of course, you get up to Manaroth. Oh, my God. I love the character. I love the fight. It looked amazing. It required you to be at your absolute best. And then you move from Manaroth to Archimonde? Come on, man. Archimonde, again, another callback toward the end of TBC and Mount Hyjal. Archimonde was a crazy fight. Archimonde, for those of you that progressed during Archimonde, you'll remember, I think it was Exorcist's raid tools, and maybe a weak aura as well, I don't really recall. But ERT had that window that showed you the overlap of everyone's beam, so you'd be able to move and position yourself to make sure you weren't, touching anyone else's beam, to make sure you weren't going to get zapped to death. And then Blizzard decided to start breaking the API, and that's when they started to remove various aspects from off of the player's plate or away from the player's hands, and it restricted us from being able to do certain things. A lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it started around that time with Archimonde, and then in Legion we lost a variety of things, which I'll touch on here in a moment. But HFC was a great raid, man. I loved it from start to finish. And I will talk about Legion real quick, but I mentioned a moment ago Blizzard started breaking things. If you recall, I played a Warlock during Legion, but if you recall, at the beginning of Legion, there was this add-on. I don't remember what it was called. We actually talked about it on stream a month or two ago. But it listed anything that was in your field of vision, this add-on listed it on your screen in the form of like uniframes, and you could hover your mouse cursor over it, and you could just multi-dot like crazy, and you didn't have to actually look at your target, click on anything, or even mouse over the target's nameplate. It was all just printed right. Like, I don't remember what it was, enemy grid. I don't remember what it was called. They broke that. Nighthold is not one of the raids on my top 8 raids of the past decade. As much as I loved it, and even though Gul'dan was the last encounter, it's not on my top raids. But Starlord Atreus, I remember they broke there was some kind of, I think it was a weak aura that put something above your head, or it was like friendly name plates or something like that. I remember they broke that. Dang, nabbit Blizzard, quit taking things away from us. But that's when things started to change a lot for raiders in particular. That's when we had to start getting really fancy with our weak ores and whatnot. It was just a few short years ago, but I don't include Emerald Nightmare or Trial of Valor or Nighthold in my top 8 raids of the past decade. Not that I didn't enjoy them, but to me, Tomb of Sargeras and Antorus the Burning Throne were not only incredibly enjoyable raids, but if you consider all the aspects, who you're fighting, the story, how the zone looks, how do you approach each encounter, I'll explain. So let's start with Tomb of Sargeras. It was codenamed or nicknamed Tomb of Soak Garrus by many raiders. I know it's not everyone's favorite raid, and it's not even my favorite raid, but I'm trying to include 2 per expansion. In Tomb of Sargeras, you're literally going into the Tomb of Sargeras. So that right there, you get 2 gold stars out of 5 just for being the Tomb of Sargeras, okay? 2 tacos out of 5. I guess I should be 2 tacos. We'll see what happens. And, you zone in and you just start murdering demons, man. Gorgoloth, or whatever his first name is, and then the demonic Inquisition people, those 2 dudes, and then you go downstairs and you kill this giant Naga. And for those who don't remember, I haven't even talked about transmog or set bonuses or anything like that, because everyone's, of course, was different. But if you recall in Tomb of Sargeras, it was a rehash and for the mythic transmog, it was an enhanced version of Tier 6. Yes, Tier 6. Right? Is that correct? Tier 6, I believe it is. Which was Black Temple at the time. Or it always is Black Temple. And God, man, some of the sets look amazing. Like my Hunter, I was still playing my Warlock. I'm still trying to farm the transmog for my Hunter out of Tomb of Sargeras. It was it's one of the coolest sets for Hunters ever. Oh, man. But you start working your way through Tomb of Sargeras, and you see some really interesting pieces of architecture. The boss fights are engaging and challenging. And then you get to the Fallen Avatar fight. Mistress, right? Is that right? I don't remember. I don't remember what the boss's name is. But the one with the light and the fell orbs, that was a challenge, of course. People had to be on top of people had to really be on the ball for that fight. I wish I had my little button with a bounce, but I don't. But Fallen Avatar, holy cow, man. Just this giant, husk of Avatar. Sorry, I kind of spaced on what I was trying to say there. This mountain of an NPC that you get to fight, first from the waist up, and then he just destroys the floor. And then you fall down, and then it's a race against time as you're dodging tornadoes and not standing in crap. Oh my goodness, man. I love that fight. As much as I hated it, I loved that fight. And then killed Jaden. Still one of the only encounters in the entire game that you cannot solo. I'm sure someone out there soloed it, but I'm pretty sure 99.99% of people cannot solo that encounter on Mythic at this point in time. And I'm pretty sure most pugs cannot Mythic kill Jaden at this point in time. That is an unforgiving, that is a difficult, and that is a wild and crazy fight, often considered one of the best fights of all time. It was absolutely bonkers, and it was killed Jaden, man. I know we fought him at the end of Sunwell Plateau, but you cannot even compare the SWP killed Jaden to the Tomb of Sargeras, the TOS killed Jaden. Talk about a glam up. Holy moly, he looked amazing. The fight was wild. And then you get to Antorus a few months later, and then we literally invaded the world of Argus, and then we invade the sanctum of the Legion itself, and we start destroying even more demons, and we're bringing the fight to the Legion. You zone in, and you're killing robots, and you're killing demons, and you're killing fellhounds, and you're getting mounts, and everything is crazy, and you're basically in space, even though you're basically in space for well, maybe not in space, but you know what I'm trying. You're on a different planet, for crying out loud, man. It's absolutely amazing. And you work your way through Antorus, and you're just killing crazy bosses left and right. This Aeoner was a stupid fight. There's always that one fight. Stinking Aeoner. What a dumb fight. As easy as it's really not. It wasn't a bad fight in that it was impossible. It's just I I love when Blizzard tries to reinvent the wheel, but I hate when it goes wrong. And to me, the Aeoner fight just was not a fun fight. But again, you go through that raid, and it was just an absolute blast seeing things from not necessarily a different perspective, but seeing things a little differently. You get to actually bring the fight to the Legion instead of the Legion bringing the fight to you. You get to see the story conclusion, for the time being, of Argus and Illidan. You get to hang out with your best buddies on a different planet. What was not to love? And then of course, you're literally interacting with in fighting and dealing with the Titans, ladies and gentlemen. Again, we're not talking about, hey, what's the best raid encounter of all time? No. The coolest, most amazing raids of the past 10 years, for whatever reason. You may not agree with the list. That's cool, man. That's fine. I'm not here to convince you of anything. But there's no denying the fact that when you zone into Antorus and you see you get to the seat of the Pantheon or whatever it's called, you murder Orgrimmar, poor old Orgrimmar. You get his amazing sword transmog. Sorry for those of you who still don't have it. And you get to the Argus encounter, and you see, what's his name? No, I don't. Whatever. The stinking Pantheon, the Titans, whatever their names are, Aeoner and company. Who cares? I can't remember right now. I'm so worked up. And you start fighting Argus, and you go through. I'm talking about things from a mythic perspective, and you see Argus start to crumble and fall, and then of course he murders you in one fell swoop. And Aeoner says, "Not today, champions. Rise and enjoy the seeds of my tree," or whatever she says. And you come back to life. And then you're dodging these giant red scythes of death and doom and despair and destruction. It was a wild encounter that was the end result of a wild and crazy expansion and a wild and crazy raid. It was amazing, man. And I think back at all of these raids that I've talked about and many more that I have not, and I can't help but think, and I hope this is what we can all take away from this experience, is I think back and I reflect on these raids and so many more, and I feel so appreciative and privileged that we as players of this game get to enjoy so many awesome things. I know it's so easy to hate on Blizzard and to hate on like the Essence grind right now, and so many people are dissatisfied with BFA and so on and so forth. But there's so much to love and so much to hold on to and cherish about our experiences in this video game. And that's just how I feel, man. Not everything is all sunshine and rainbows. Not every raid encounter or raid has been the best ever. Spine and Madness of Deathwing says hello. They sucked. I will never not believe that. There were terrible dungeons or terrible raid bosses. But I just think back at all this stuff, man, and they're just, how lucky are we that we get to enjoy a game like this that allows us to raid not only, as often as we do, but to raid how we do, and we get to fight the creatures that we get to fight and enjoy them the way that we want to enjoy them. It's just fantastic, man. I'm not going to include Battle for Azeroth into this because, truth be told, I think Uldir looks cool. I don't even have footage of this. So my wife's probably editing the video, and she's like, "Wait, where's the footage of what?" No, I don't even have footage of this garbage. I shouldn't say garbage because that's not what I meant to say. But I think about Uldir, and it's not my favorite raid of all time, but I think it looked awesome because of the corruption in the Titan facility. Battle of Dazar lore, I don't hate it. I don't think it was anything fancy or amazing, especially compared to other raids of the era. And Eternal Palace, whatever. And Crucible Storms, we're not even going to talk about it. So I'm not including BFA in my top 8 because I don't think they fit in the top 8. Poor BFA. But I hope you guys appreciate the list. I would love to know. Type in like your top 3, your top 5, or top 8, or top 10 raids of all time of the past decade. I want to know what your opinion is. Go check out my dungeon video. Go check out all the videos in the month of December so far. And remember, I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for being here. Live well, be well, do well. My name's Brutal. I'll see you in the next one.